Thank you for watching QTV with the news. My name is Diana SUMBWE. We take a look at our top stories. Caritas Zambia has called on government to declare the hunger situation in some parts of the country a national disaster. 3 male juveniles have been burnt to death at Chichele fishing camp in Chief Chiwangala's area in Qtv district after a grass-thatched house in which they were sleeping went up in flames. And National Development Minister Alexander Chiteme says information from unofficial sources is undermining confidence in the economy. And now details in our news. Caritas Zambia has called on government to declare the hunger situation in some parts of the country a national disaster. Addressing a media briefing, Caritas Zambia Bishop Director Evans Chinyemba says this will help to mobilize resources and the necessary food items that are needed to feed the people from now on and also support them to recover during the next farming season. Bishop Chinyemba says the Catholic Church is taking the bold step to supplement government's effort to provide relief to the affected households in southern, western, Lusaka, eastern and central provinces and Lunga district in Luapula province. He says the church is targeting 42,000 households who have been affected by unfavorable weather conditions and also help them recover from the 2018 to 2019 disaster. Bishop Chinyemba adds that the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops, ZCCB, in collaboration with Catholic Relief Services, Norwegian Church Aid and Catholic Agency for Overseas Development, will spend not less than over $9 million United States dollars towards providing relief food.
We urge you to put aside your partisan inclination in this matter. It is an act of injustice to gain political marriages in a situation where people are in dire need of food and are vulnerable. Regardless of where the help is coming from, people must not be told to support political party A, political party B, just because they have provided some food to alleviate people's hunger. Food must be distributed without strings attached. Hunger has no political line. Hunger is hunger. It doesn't have a political color.
Speaking at the same briefing, PF Luapula Member of Parliament Emerin Kabanshi has expressed the fear that poverty levels in her constituency will increase from 70% in 2015 to 100% in 2019 if nothing is done to fight the current hunger situation. Ms. Kabanshi has since commended the Catholic Church for considering her area as one of the beneficiaries.
Pregnant mothers are becoming malnourished. What type of children are they going to give birth to? Children are stopping going to school because maybe they haven't eaten for 5 days. And that's what our bishops are talking about. The effects of hunger, of malnutrition, won't be stopped in 3 years, 5 years. It has a toll on the future of that child. And it has a toll on the future of this nation. So for me, as a member of parliament who comes from a very rural, poor constituency, where the poverty levels in 2015 was at 92%.
Meanwhile, Caritas Zambia Executive Director Eugene Kabilika says the church will not distribute relief food in areas where there are by-elections to abide by the Electoral Code of Conduct. President Edgar Lungu led scores of people in laying wreaths on the grave of late second Republican President Frederick Chiluba at Embassy Memorial Park in Lusaka. 18th June 2019 marks the 8th anniversary of Dr. Chiluba's passing. Former President Kenneth Kaunda and Rupia Banda also laid wreaths on Dr. Chiluba's tomb. Other notables who laid wreaths on former Republican President's tomb include his 2 former vice presidents, Enoch Kavindele and Godfrey Mianda. Our staffer Lazarus Chula was in attendance and brought us this report.
President Edgar Lungu has become the first sitting head of state to ever grace the passing anniversary of former President Frederick Chiluba. The late Dr. Chiluba died on the 18th of June 2011, and today, Tuesday, the 18th of June 2019, marks the 8th anniversary of his passing. President Lungu led scores of people in laying wreaths at the tomb of the late Dr. Chiluba. Former presidents Kenneth Kaunda and Rupia Banda also laid wreaths on Dr. Chiluba's tomb. Other notables who laid wreaths on the former Republican president's tomb includes his two former vice presidents, Enoch Kavendele and Godfrey Mianda. Speaking shortly after laying his wreaths, Dr. Kaunda urged Zambians to continue remembering what late Dr. Chiluba did for Zambia.
May all Zambians continue to remember, and may God bless him what he did for us all. Amen. Amen.
For the former First family, the presence of President Lungu and two other former heads of state at this anniversary is what it should be. Family representative Joshua Mtisa thinks that the late Dr. Chiluba is now receiving the respect he deserves.
I'm happy to inform the nation through you that the presence of the Republican president, the presence of the former president, President Banda and the other dignitaries has actually elected us.
The late Dr. Chiluba served as Republican president for 2 terms, from 1991 to 2002. Lazarus Sichula, QTV News.
3 male juveniles have been burnt to death at Chichele Fishing Camp in Chief Chiwanangala's chiefdom in Qtv district after a grass-thatched house in which they were sleeping caught fire. Police spokesperson Esther Katongo says the incident happened on 16 June 2019 between 22 hours and 04 hours when the father of one of the victims, only identified as Vashi Abiton, aged between 50 and 55, left the fire on after smoking fish and went to sleep. Ms. Katongo says the fire later spread and gutted the house in which the victims were sleeping, and they sustained serious burns and died on the spot, while the father survived the inferno with burns and is admitted to Qtv District Mainland Hospital. She has identified the deceased Abiton Mwansa, aged 15, Alan Ishuko, aged 8, and Mel Lubuto, aged 5. The bodies of the deceased have been buried and graves marked. Mrs. Katongo has also disclosed that the Zambia police has received 18 fire-related cases, of which 8 were reported as arson, while 10 were reported as fire incidences. She has since advised members of the public to avoid leaving fire or other electrical appliances such as heaters unattended to, especially during this cold time of the year, to avoid loss of life and property.
We have observed an increase in reports of fire incidences during cold seasons compared to other periods of the year. Some of the fires reported as arson turn out to have been caused as a result of negligence on the part of occupants. From 1st June 2019 to date, we have received 18 fire-related cases, of which 8 were reported as arson, while 10 were reported as fire incidences.
National Development Planning Minister Alexander Chiteme says information from unofficial sources to the media is affecting national development and undermining confidence in the economy. Mr. Chiteme says government will therefore regularly engage with cooperating partners at high-level meetings to address issues that are affecting government and development in the country. Speaking during the official opening of the high-level policy dialogue between government and cooperating partners in Lusaka, Mr. Qtv has pledged the government's commitment to engage and dialogue with cooperating partners in an open-minded and transparent manner. He says government will build on and initiate to establish a regular and permanent platform on which to engage the cooperating partners. Mr. Qtv states that among the issues to be discussed during the meeting include macroeconomic challenges being faced by the country, food security following prolonged dry spells, and the implementation of the 7th National Development Plan.
As government, we will build on this initiative to make sure that we establish a regular and permanent platform on which we will engage with our cooperating partners at this high level. Our willingness as government to interact with yourselves is well demonstrated by the cabinet colleagues and myself availing ourselves today to address the pertinent issues. The two topics for discussion today are timely because they address issues which government is grappling with. Without doubt, government, like other stakeholders, is concerned with the microeconomic challenges that we are facing as a nation. This is why government is taking measures to address the situation. In due course, our Minister of Finance, Honorable Monakatwe, MP, will speak in detail about these measures. I hope that the discussion will help Your Excellencies appreciate the precise state of the economy as for now. I regret, though, to say that there has been too much information from official sources in the media, which is undermining the confidence in the economy.
And Cooperating Partners Group Chairperson Mark Richardson has stressed the need for such high-level meetings to be action-oriented. Mr. Richardson, who is also head of DFID Zambia, notes that similar forums have had lapses in the past, hence the need for government to ensure there is frank engagement on issues that matter, followed by action.
Firstly, it should provide a means of having frank, open conversations with the government about issues which matter in our relationship. And I will say a bit more about these in a moment. Where we disagree or where we have concerns, it should provide a forum to be open and direct about these. Secondly, where the government feels cooperating partners could be doing more or work differently or provide a different sort of support, it can use this dialogue to raise those issues. Equally, for our assistance as CPs to be effective, usually depends on actions by government, both government policy and implementation of policy, whether that is in the economic space or in the social sectors or elsewhere. So we will also want to use this forum, this dialogue, to be clear about our requests and our asks of government to ensure that CPs can most effectively support development and poverty reduction in Zambia. And thirdly, the forum should be action-orientated. So we should use this forum to identify concrete actions and measures that allow us to progress the issues or concerns that we discuss. And a measure of the success of this dialogue will be if we then see progress on the issues discussed. If, when we meet again, we're still discussing the same issues, then I think that would undermine the purpose of the dialogue.
Finance Minister Margaret Monakatwe has clarified that the support from the Chinese People's Party for the construction of a modern multi-purpose office facility for the hosting of the 2022 African Union Heads of State Summit is a grant and not a loan. Mrs. Monakatwe says the decision by the Chinese People's Party to extend the support followed the Zambian government's request. She says the conference facility will be constructed within the Mulungushi International Conference Center grounds. Mrs. Monakatwe says the grant agreement will only be signed once the feasibility study that informs the total project cost has been finalized. The Finance Minister was responding to a question by Chipili Member of Parliament Juice Chavi, who wanted to know when the loan for the rehabilitation of the conference facilities in preparation for the hosting of the 2022 African Union Heads of State Summit was contracted, what the scope of works to be undertaken under the project is, what the total loan amount is, whether the loan has already been procured, and what the conditions for the loan are.
Insista, as indicated earlier, The cost of the project and the amount of the grant will be informed by the feasibility study that is being finalized. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, only the exchange of notes have been signed. The grant agreement will only be signed once the feasibility study has been completed and the project cost established. Indeed, sir, we agreed with our Chinese counterparts on the respective responsibilities of the two parties as follows. A, the Zambian government will provide the land for the project and the general facilitation of the projects, such as permits. And B, the Chinese government will be responsible for the design and engineering of the project, the provision of construction machinery, provision of equipment, needed materials, provision of engineers and technical personnel for the construction works. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Zambia Revenue Authority ZRA has intercepted 144 cases of benylin cough syrup that contains a narcotic drug called codeine. ZRA Corporate Communications Manager Topsy Skalinda says investigations have revealed that bus drivers, pupils, students, and some working class are consuming several bottles of benylin that contain codeine to get high and become more alert. Mr. Skalinda says lately, benylin with codeine has become of high demand and suppliers are now selling it profitably. He says authority has deemed it right to hand over these drugs to the Zambia Medicines and Regulatory Authority ZAMRA. And Mr. Skalinda says the authority has also seized over 1,800 cases of Konyagi spirits. He says this is in a matter where the importer underdeclared the number of cases being brought into the country. Mr. Skalinda states that as a result, the importer only paid 80,000 kwacha in taxes, with government losing over 410,000 kwacha. Vice President Inonge Wina says there is need for the Economics Association of Zambia EAZ to help bridge the gap in financial literacy in the country. Mrs. Wina has observed that people in the country are being swayed easily with misinformation by sources who are not credible owing to the financial literacy gap. Speaking when the EAZ, led by its president Dorinda Habazoka, called on her, Mrs. Wina urged the EAZ to play a role in diffusing misinformation in the country. She notes the need for the EAZ to, for instance, facilitate informed discussions on the benefits of transitioning from the value-added tax VAT to the goods and sales tax.
There is need to create informed discussions on various sector economic reports, including the benefits, for example, of moving away from VAT to sales tax, so that the general public understands government's direction on this matter. Otherwise, a lot of people are grappling in the dark and can be swayed by any suggestion from some uninformed sources. The Economics Association of Zambia can be very helpful in analyzing economic issues, in scrutinizing, in advising, in critiquing actually a number of government policies.
And EAZ President Dorinda Habazoka says his association will in July this year hold a National Economic Summit in Livingstone as part of its advocacy activities. Dr. Habazoka says the summit, that will be graced by President Edgar Lungu, is meant to create a platform where people can have discussions on the economy in a more mature manner.
ZRA has come on board itself, ZESCO, and other companies. I think we have over 10 to 15 companies that have financially contributed to the success of this event. We invited the Republican President to come and grace the first ever National Economic Summit. Although it's national, it's going to be international in nature. We asked the Republican President to invite his colleague from Kenya, His Excellency Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta. We have also invited former President Jakaya Kikwete and Mr. Thabo Mbeki of South Africa. We have invited COMESA, SADC, the African Union, the World Farmers Association is going to be represented by its president. We have investors from Germany, from Ethiopia, from India, from China, that are going to come at this function. So it's going to be an academic conference and a business-to-business conference, and also a meeting between government and other stakeholders.
The opposition UPND has vowed to retain the Katuba parliamentary seat tooth and nail. UPND Secretary General Stephen Katuka says his party will do everything possible to ensure that Katuba constituency remains its seat. Mr. Katuka has, however, ruled out using underhand methods such as vote buying to win the Katuba parliamentary by-election slated for the 30th of July. He tells Q News that the UPND has no money to buy voters to vote, but it tends to use persuasive messages it has been using to win in other by-elections.
Well, Katuba was our seat, that you know. Katuba was our seat, and we are not going to grab a seat from anybody. We are simply going to defend our seat. So the chances are there, and we are game for Katuba. And we will do everything and anything possible to retain Katuba. The votes we got were not bought. The votes we got were campaigned for. It is our message that was getting down to the minds of the people. That's why they voted for us like that. And we always do the same. Our role is to campaign, and with that, our strategy. Talk to the people, convince them, and eventually they'll give us a vote. We don't have that kind of money of buying anybody.
The Ministry of Higher Education has launched its first ever national higher education policy and its implementation plan aimed at enhancing access, quality, and effectiveness of higher education and skills. Speaking during the launch, Higher Education Minister Nkanduluo says the policy addresses financing challenges faced by higher education and skills sectors. Professor Luo says the policy further provides for a clear shift from focusing only on academic competences to also focusing on enhancing the development of well-rounded and responsible learners. She adds that through the implementation of the policy, the country's human capital will be developed to play a pivotal role of driving the national economic development agenda without leaving anyone behind.
Universities and colleges are not places of work. They are places where you find a collection of men and women who are the intellectuals of our country. In French, we call them les crème, les crème. These are the think tanks of our country. If you want to be playing politics, if you want to be sleeping and going to the university or college at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, you are in the wrong place. And this is the difference that this policy we are launching is going to bring to the higher education sector. And I just want to prepare you and prepare your minds.
Speaking at the same launch, Acting Secretary to the Cabinet Patrick Kangwa says it is expected that the outcome of the policy will not only impact the higher education sector, but the development of the nation as a whole. In a speech read on her behalf by Permanent Secretary at the Cabinet Office, Kesha Omwenya, Mr. Kangwa says his office will closely monitor the implementation of the policy to see to it that it positively impacts the higher education sector and Zambia's development agenda.
I've been informed and as underscored by the Permanent Secretary of Higher Education, the policy development was marked by extensive consultations involving various stakeholders. This is as it should be. Today is a very important day, not only for the Ministry of Higher Education, but the nation as a whole. It is even more significant given that this is the first time ever in the history of the country that a separate policy to superintend over the higher education sector has been developed. This is a demonstration of how clear, focused, and determined this government is in giving direction and driving the development of the sector towards the attainment of our national development goals.
Chairperson for the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture, Lands and Natural Resources, Maxas Ngonga, says it is not necessary for government to declare the hunger situation in some parts of the country a national disaster. Mr. Ngonga tells Q News that a check by the committee in most parts of the country, such as Muchinga, Mukushi, Serenge, northern and northwestern provinces, among others, has revealed that they received enough rains and there is sufficient grain to last till the next farming season. He has acknowledged that some parts of the country received very low rainfall, which affected crop yields, but that this does not mean the whole country is facing hunger. Mr. Ngonga further states that the challenge government is facing at the moment is to mobilize grain in areas that received adequate rainfall to help feed the other areas that did not receive adequate rainfall. He says it is therefore not necessary to declare the hunger situation in some parts of the country a national disaster for now.
Yes, we understand that half of the country received, below normal rainfall and therefore severely affected, the cropping programs and the yields of our farmers, especially in the southern, western, part of central province and part of eastern province. However, for those of us that had the opportunity to travel the country, if you went into north of central province, I'm talking about Mukushi, Serenge, you go into Muchinga, you go into the entire northern province, the entire Wapula province, the entire northwestern provinces. The rainfall that we received were more than sufficient to give us a good cropping program. So for this particular year, the challenge that we have is to make sure that we mobilize.
The Lusaka Water and Storage Company has commenced the filling up of sinkholes and cavities that have formed in its various service stations following the contamination of water experienced earlier this year. In January this year, over 400 people from Lusaka's Mtendere, Nyumbayanga, Kablonga and Ibex Hill suffered from diarrhea after consuming contaminated water. Company Public Relations Officer Shamba Mzungu told Q News that the company is filling up sinkholes that have formed near service stations and has started with the sinkholes around Shaft 5 service station in Chalala area. We have more in this report.
In January this year, over 400 residents of Lusaka's Mtendere, Nyumbayanga, Kablonga, Ibex Hill and surrounding areas were affected with diarrhea and other stomach infections as a result of consuming contaminated water. According to the Lusaka Water and Storage Company, the water contamination was as a result of a leaking pipe at one of the utilities service stations. Following the development, the utilities undertaking various interventions aimed at ensuring that water sources are protected and safe from contamination. Shamba Mzungu is Lusaka Water and Storage Company Public Relations Officer.
A few months ago that we had a contamination case along Leopards Hill Road which affected parts of Nyumbayanga and Ibex Hill.
One of the interventions the utility has embarked on is the filling up of sinkholes.
This is one of our biggest groundwater sources in Lusaka. Shaft 5 supplies the southern part of Lusaka. It supplements the water which comes from Kafue. So in terms of the volume, Shaft 5 produces over 1.2 million liters per hour. So it's quite an important source of water for Lusaka Water and Storage Company. As you've seen around, there are cavities which have been identified around which are a potential, avenue for contamination of groundwater because these cavities are around the boreholes. So what we are doing today is to backfill the cavities so that we do not allow water coming from the surrounding areas to just run in the cavities freely.
But what has caused these cavities?
Surrounding areas around the boreholes here, many years ago, they did not have any properties, they did not have human activity. But over the years, you've seen that people have built closer to the boreholes. And for us, that is a threat to the water underground. And so because of the human activities around, that may compromise the the quality of the water underground. And therefore, as a company, we have embarked on this exercise to ensure that the ground sources which are dotted all over Lusaka are protected.
It is hoped that with such interventions being put in place, the contamination of water, as was seen earlier this year, which affected over 400 residents, will be avoided. Nakaonga reporting for Qtv News in Lusaka.
And finally, in sports, Youth, Sport and Child Development Minister Moses Mawere says his ministry has engaged the Anti-Corruption Commission, Zambia Police Service, to investigate match-fixing allegations against former FAS Vice President Boniface Mwamelo and some players. Mawere says the ministry wants law enforcement agencies to investigate the matter fully. He says that the vice of match-fixing is a serious issue which affects the growth of the sports industry in Zambia, as it compromises the value of sports. The minister was responding to a question by Milengi Member of Parliament Mwansa Mbulakulima, who wanted to know how government has received the issue of match-fixing allegations involving former Football Association of Zambia FAS officials and players following revelations by FIFA, whether government has engaged investigative wings to probe the matter further, and what important measures government is taking to ensure that Zambian football officials and players do not engage in any unethical conduct such as match fixing.
The composition of the committee is as follows, Mr. Speaker. 1, representative from the Anti-Corruption Commission. 2, representative from the Zambia Police Service. 3, representative from the Drug Enforcement Commission. 4, representative from the Office of the President. 5, representative from the Zambia Information, Communications and Technology Authority, ZITA, and a representative from the National Anti-Terrorist Center. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government through the National Sports Council of Zambia is also supporting an initiative which advocates against match fixing, which includes organizations such as Chimunya Mwitwa Sports Foundation, which is raising awarenesses on the consequences of unethical behavior in sports such as match fixing. The National Sports Council of Zambia has also included match fixing as one of the cross-cutting issues which must be fought by all sports federations.
To end the news, we recap on stories making headlines. Caritas Zambia has called on government to declare the hunger situation in some parts of the country a national disaster. 3 male juveniles have been burned to death at Chichele fishing camp in Chief Chiwanangala's area in Qtv district after a grass-thatched house in which they were sleeping went up in flames. And National Development Minister Alexander Chiteme says information from unofficial sources is undermining confidence in the economy. On that note, we end the news. Thank you for watching.